Good afternoon. My name is Gabe Elias. As Chairman of the Associated Student Speakers Program, I'd like to welcome you to our 11th program of the fall quarter. We are most pleased to have with us today the most successful coach in the history of collegiate basketball, a man who has won 7 out of 8 NCAA championships, the last 5 in a row. This year he's got a team with mostly new faces, and people always say that UCLA can't keep on going and winning year after year, but they always change their minds whenever we take the court. And that gives me great pleasure to introduce a living legend, John Wooden.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's not often when I speak at places that I get to remain seated, and this is kind of nice. Particularly when you get to the point when you start asking me questions, I can probably take them a little better if I'm seated than if I'm standing up. I haven't attended the other programs, and I'm not quite certain of the procedure, but Gabe asked me to make a few introductory remarks perhaps, and then leave it open to questions for you, and I'll attempt to answer the best of my ability any questions that you might care to put forth regarding basketball. And my opening remarks will be regarding basketball. I'll give you perhaps an idea of my philosophy about the game, what we try to do each and every year. First of all, I think that there's 3 things that a coach must have in mind. I don't want to convey the impression to you that what I do is the only way. I think it's the way for me, but that doesn't mean that it would necessarily be correct for someone else, because we're all different. We all have different ideas and different ways, and what a dull, monotonous world it would be if we were all alike, and what a dull, monotonous game of basketball we'd have if we all thought alike and all coached alike and all played alike. It wouldn't be very popular, I'm sure, if such were the case. And I think it is a wonderful game. And I'm deeply appreciative of those that are here today, because you must be basketball fans. And if you're basketball fans, then I love you. It's just that simple. I feel that, first of all, you have to get them into condition. I think it's 3 things, and one is condition. And the players must realize that there are many ways to attain and maintain condition. Now, what we do on the floor is very important, but actually what they do off the floor is equally as important. And some don't do between practices what I would like for them to do. And as a result, it makes the practices a little harder for them, and they suffer a little more during the practices, and they're never in as good a condition as they should be or could be. But you don't expect perfection, but you reach for it. I think it's a goal that we ought to try for, and I like to have my players feel that they're going to be in better condition than any team against whom they will participate. And if they feel that they are, and if they're working hard toward obtaining that objective, I believe that they will play like it most of the time. It's important to be in good condition and maintain the good condition, because I think it's a proven fact that the ability to properly and quickly execute the fundamentals leaves you in direct proportion to your condition. And games are won or lost in the closing minutes, generally speaking, of each half. And the team that is in better condition, assuming that other things are equal, will be performing a little more efficiently in those critical periods, because they won't be quite as tired and will just be able to shoot a little better, pass a little better, defend a little better, jump a little higher, and do the things that will be necessary toward scoring more points than the opponent. That's what it really amounts to. The second thing that I think that is a coach's great responsibility is to see that they learn to properly and quickly execute the fundamentals, and I mean all of the fundamentals. Now, there's some that work hard to be able to execute the offensive fundamentals. They like to shoot. Some work much harder on their shooting than they do on their passing. most of them work harder on offense than they do on defense, and that's natural, and I'm not critical of a person who has that feeling. I'm just critical of them when they go out and don't work hard on defense. It takes both. They must be able to shoot and to be able to get the shot away. So if they can shoot but can't get shots, that doesn't help you much. If they can get shots but can't make shots, that doesn't help you much. If they can pass but won't pass, that doesn't help you much. I've said that I like players who not only can pass but will pass, and I've had some that can and will. I've had some that could and wouldn't, but I like them that can and will. They must be able to execute all of the fundamentals. They must want a rebound. They must assume that each shot is going to be missed and go get the rebound and not stand around waiting for the rebound to come to them or wait for somebody else to get the rebound and then pass it to them. They must want it. You can't get it if you just stand back waiting. So the ability to quickly and properly execute the fundamentals is most important in my philosophy of teaching any type of athletics. And while at UCLA it's been only basketball, prior to that I had some experience, quite a few years as a matter of fact, of coaching baseball, tennis, track and field, and 1 year of football. And and I consider myself to be one of the smarter football coaches because I coached 1 year and didn't coach anymore. And I completed the year on a long winning streak, so that's real good, and I'm just smart enough to get out of it. So the fundamentals are the second thing, and the third thing is you must get across the idea that it is a team game and they must play together. You can call it anything you want, team spirit, teamwork, self-sacrifice, whatever you want. It all amounts to the same thing. And I think in the final analysis that you have to have all three of these things. No matter how team-oriented you are, if you're not in condition and you can't execute the fundamentals, it doesn't help you much. No matter how well you can execute the fundamentals, if you're not in condition and you're a selfish individual, it doesn't help the team much. So it takes all three. If you're conditioned, you are in condition, but you are not team-oriented, and you don't know the fundamentals, you're not much good to the team as a whole. So it takes all three of these things. And it's been my deep and abiding philosophy for many, many years that the three things are most important. Sometimes I think if the ability is equal, the most difficult to get is the true team spirit. And I don't think it should be, because I think that's what we need in everything, whether it be in the home, as a student here at UCLA, whether it be in our city or our country, our state, or in the world. I think that's all we need. As some of you may or may not have heard, that I developed something many years ago, which I'm not going to talk about, to just explain one thing to you, called my pyramid of success, that I try to live up to. Now, I don't mean to infer that I do, but I try. But I'm weak, and I err and make mistakes and sin and so on, but I try. And I have come to the conclusion and really believe that all you want or all I want is just peace of mind with ourselves. And if we have that, I think we have everything. And my definition of success is peace of mind through self-satisfaction in knowing that you've done the best that you're capable of doing. Now, the good Lord didn't see fit to create us all equal in any respect, physically, environmentally, as far as appearance is concerned, as far as height or weight or looks. We're all different. But we all have an opportunity to make the most of what we have under the conditions that exist for us. And if we're a whiner and a complainer and are always comparing ourselves with the other fella, we never make the most of what we have, and we're just abject failures. That's all there is to it. And my idea is to try to make the most with what you have, and then regardless of the scores, if you're a coach, you always win. Now, you won't win in the eyes of the alumni, I know that, but I still feel that peace with yourself is far more important, and if you have that, eventually I think the scores will be to your liking more often than not. I believe that's enough in the way of preliminary remarks, and I'll entertain your questions now. Yes.
Last year, before the national finals, you said something to the effect that you wouldn't trade our chances with anyone's. Is there any other team's talent around the nation that you would trade for ours?
I know very little about the talent of other teams around the nation, and that I would be going against my philosophy if I said that I would rather have someone else's material. I don't believe in poor-mouthing, so to speak, our material. We have good material. You're talking about this year. We have good.
I'm not trying to derogate our own team.
Yes.
I'm just saying, which other teams in the nation do you feel will also?
I don't have any other team's material. I have UCLA's material. I'm going to try to do the best with UCLA's material and not worry about the others. I like them to worry about us. Some of you know, and some of you undoubtedly disagree with me, which is fine. And I'm not against even my players disagreeing with me on things. I'm not, strange as it may seem to you. I like to, if they disagree, I just like to know about it. And I like to try to analyze as best I can their disagreement. But I have to make the decisions. And when I make the decisions, I expect them to abide by them, whether they agree with them or not. I won't always be right, I know that, but I'm going to try to be, and I believe I'm in best position to make decisions on the background that I have had, and I believe that someone has to make it, and making decisions is often a lonely position. But if you refrain from making them, or if you let outside people make them for you, if you let your emotions make them, they're not going to be right very often. So you better make them as best you can. And I don't believe in scouting other teams too much. I don't want our players to worry about the other fellas. I say let them worry about us. So I don't like compare. I've tried to teach my players not to compare. For example, when you start comparing yourself with somebody else, you always compare with somebody that you think has more in a material way, probably. You don't compare yourself with those fellows that seem to have less. It's always those that seem to have more. So just don't compare. Make the best of what you have, and you don't have any need to compare. You'll have them comparing with you. Yes?
It seemed 3 or 4 years ago, and it was reported that you were firmly against the stall. But in the last couple of years, it seems that you've been using it to break the defense, or to have the opposition defend to your liking. Are you confirmed now to the idea of using it for that purpose?
Older people change, the same as younger people, and I believe that we learn all the time as we grow older. Certainly we should. I believe I tell my basketball players, you either continue to improve or you go down. You don't get here and stand. Maybe the improvement is very small, and maybe there are hills and valleys toward improvement, but constantly we hope we're going up. We may down a little while and then up a little higher than we were before, and so on. We can't always maintain a peak at all, but there is constant improvement. So I think your ideas will change, but in this, my idea has not changed at all. Now, I kind of fooled you, didn't I? I went around the back way a little bit. My idea has not changed at all. I'm very much against the stall. I am probably the foremost exponent among college coaches for the adoption of the time clock. I'd like to make it 30 seconds to agree with the international rules. I'm very much against it. I have never said it was poor strategy. Not at all. I've never said it was poor strategy. I have never said I would not use it. Never have I said that. I've used it at various times ever since I've coached. Many years before you were born, I was using it. And I'm quite sure that I will continue to use it whenever I feel that it is in the best interests of our team in that particular game. But I am not for it. I wish the rules would not permit it. And the rules makers are constantly trying to put in rules. They put in a hash mark on the side. They put in a 10-second rule. They put in a 3-second rule. They put in 5-second rules. And gracious sakes, they've got all sorts of counting that the officials are going to have to do now. I don't know if you're familiar with the new rule. I've been reading it for weeks and weeks, and I'm not familiar with it yet. All I know is that there's one case where a player can be standing in the forecourt near the hash mark just next to the midcourt, and if he holds the ball for 4 seconds and then dribbles it for 4 seconds in the midcourt, then he can dribble it for 4 seconds into the forecourt and pick it up in the front court, and can pick it up and hold it again for 4 seconds. And so he's been from front court to midcourt to front court, dribbling and holding, and he's had it for 16 seconds, but he can't keep it over 5 seconds. And yet he's already had it for 16, and it's legal. So this is what the rules makers have done. They've put our poor officials in a horrible spot. Imagine, some of them are going to have to, on occasions now, imagine, going to have to count 16. And furthermore, they're going to have to see an imaginary line extending across the floor from those hash marks that are on the side. They're going to have to see that imaginary line, because where the player's standing, whether he's in the forecourt or the midcourt, makes a difference, and some of those fellows have trouble seeing anyway. It's very difficult. They've made it difficult. Let's ask the young lady.
UCLA's been kind of weak at guard in the last couple of years. Like last year, Wicks was sort of the floor leader. What's the situation this year?
I don't agree with you at all, young lady. I just don't agree with you at all. We were not weak at guard last year. Henry Bibby certainly was an all-tournament player last year in the finals of the NCAA. That was a gross carriage of misjustice. Gross carriage. Henry Bibby should have been he's all-tournament guard. I don't care whether they picked him or not. He was an all-tournament guard. I know he was. I said so immediately after the tournament, and I still think so. Now, they picked the more colorful players, the more publicized, the taller players that were more likely to get contracts in the professionals, which they did very well, and I'm fine, pleased. Many of them did. I think it was tremendous. But we were not weak at guards. We just weren't as strong as we had been in some years. And the year before, we had John Vallely and Bibby at guard, and I wasn't at all displeased with John Vallely and Bibby in any way, and I'm not going to be displeased with our guards this year either. Now, I didn't answer your question very well, but I skirted around it, yes.
I have two questions. First, how do you feel about the zone defense? And secondly, how do you feel the desire to play professional basketball has affected your ability to maintain a balanced team?
The first question is, how do I feel about the zone defense? And I don't feel that the zone defense is the best defense. That's the reason I don't use it. I don't feel it is the best defense, and I know that very few teams at any level, whether it be high school or intercollegiate, primarily at those levels, have ever won the big championships that use zone defenses. Very seldom. It just doesn't happen. And very few of the teams that become the champions use zone defenses. Now, a lot of them may get up there to also-rans, but we don't care about the also-rans. We'll be the champions. And for the most part, they just don't. For example, where I was raised and brought up in Indiana, it was truly a basketball-mad state at the time. It was many years before any team ever won the state championship that used a zone defense. And finally, when a team did win it by using a zone defense, they had a tremendous team that was so effective offensively that I think they didn't win because of their zone. I think they won in spite of their zone defense, in my opinion. And I know that most people back there would agree with me at that particular time. So if I am against the zone defense, I am not against anybody using the zone defense. I wished everybody we played used it against us, or none, because you have to prepare for it because it's different. But if 90% of your teams are going to use man-to-man, you're not going to use 90% of your time preparing against the zone. And consequently, you probably don't play as well against it because you haven't hit against it as much. So I'm not against the zone defense. I think it's a good defense, but I don't think it is as good as a man-to-man, particularly a combination man-to-man defense, which I'd play. So naturally, I think that's the best. As far as team play, has the desire, I presume you mean, for a lucrative professional contract, has that hurt our team play? I don't think it has. And if I ever see and feel that it is helping it is hurting us as far as an individual is concerned, that individual is going to get more time with me in near proximity, and probably will need reinforcement on the seat of his game pants. Now, that doesn't mean that some don't get carried away out there. They do, but I like team play, and they must play as a team. And if I think they're carried away on individual scoring, they probably just won't play that much. Particularly in the games, the preseason games, the pre-conference games that aren't going to hurt you. That's where we have to develop them toward how we hope they'll play when the conference comes along. For example, I have one rule that if you watch our early games, and I suspect most of you, how many have season tickets in here? I thought a lot of you in here would have. You watch in our early season games, if a man is guarding a forward and they permit the forward to drive around him toward the baseline, you watch how quickly he comes out of the game when that happens. He'll come out. Like last year in the early games, if Sidney Wicks permitted a player to drive around him the baseline in the non-conference games, he came out. Now, when we got into the conference games, if he happened to permit that, he didn't come out. I just figured, well, I'd failed to teach him well enough in the non-conference games, so I better leave him in. So I have little quirks like that, but I think the best way that I know of to get a player to be a team player is not by telling him to be a team player, but it's just not letting him play with a team. And then he sometimes gets the idea. We have players occasionally that during a practice we won't let them shoot. They can do everything but shoot. They just can't shoot during practice. That sometimes helps them. I don't tell them you shoot too much. I've already told them that, and they're still shooting too much, so I just say, today you don't shoot. Just don't get to shoot at all. And sometimes they figure that I'm emphasizing the point that they've been shooting too much.
What type of offense will you use, and will there be a chance at any time this year of putting in Sven Nader and Walton at the same time?
We're using a different type of offense than I have ever used. We're using what I feel will be a part of the offense that we used when Louis Alcindor or Kareem Jabbar played. Well, he was Louis Alcindor when he played for us, so I guess I should refer to him as that way. And the type of high post offense that we've used at all other times, as we did in the past few years, I think we've incorporated those two things, the strengths, I believe, or some of the strengths at any rate, of those two offenses to meet the strengths of the particular personnel that we have, which changes, of course, every year. And I would say that undoubtedly there will be times when, as the season progresses, that it will be, will find us using both Walton and Nader at the same time. There will be times we will. I haven't done this yet because at this present time I want an adequate replacement and work toward that for Walton. But as time goes by, we will probably, against certain teams and certain types of play and certain sizes, we might do that. Yes. Yes.
I have a couple of impressions on the stall we were talking about before, and I was wondering if you could tell me if I'm right or not. One thing is, someone was talking about you changing your attitude toward use of the stall, and it seems to me that all coaches use the stall late in the game, late in the second half, to protect the lead that they put up through the game up to that point. It's an accepted part of basketball at that stage. It was even in pro basketball before the 24-second clock came in. And this is your use of it, your strategical use of it, like late in the SC game at the Sports Arena last year, and protecting the lead against Villanova in the NCAA championship game. And this would be opposed to something that you don't like. Let's say like a certain school across town that came out a couple of times, and from the opening moments of the first half, used it strictly the whole game, whether they were ahead or behind or whatever, just their offense for the entire 40 minutes. And I was wondering if maybe that's the difference. You can see its strategical use late in the game to protect the lead, but not as an entire offense for the whole game.
That's essentially it. I'm against the use of a stall when you're definitely against it if you're behind or even the score is tied. I think you schedule games to play them. You don't schedule not to play, and if you go out there and don't play, I think that's a travesty on the game itself. I don't like it, but as long as the rules permit it, you're within your right to do it. My point is that they're trying to do all sorts of things to prevent them from doing it, as I say, by these new counts and the hash marks. Those are in there for just one purpose, to try to prevent that type of stall. But you can still do it. And as long as you can still do it, it's wrong. There's one way to stop it, and that's to put the clock in, and that's what I'm for. Young lady?
You're probably more on top of it and know it from the side of being in the meetings and stuff. Why don't they want to put the clock in? What are the arguments against such a clock?
Well, you hear different. One of the big reasons is the expense of an installation of clocks, particularly for the high schools. Well, I have said, let's just put it in for the colleges, and then you get back to the high schools want to play by the same rules, but they don't. We've got some different rules, less fouls to foul out, and there's some different rules. But that's one of the rules. Another one is that they feel that it would be too much like the pros. Well, there are those who don't want to do something because somebody else does it. Well, gracious sakes. If somebody else does something that's good, I see nothing wrong with it. Just don't do the things they do that are bad. And I think that's the way you learn and improve. And that's one of the reasons. Another, say that teams will go into complete zone defenses, deep zones, and will force all scoring to be from the outside. Well, gracious, the way these fellows shoot, that's not bad. And I think they'll shoot. I think they'll shoot well. I think it would change. You'd have to shoot, take the shot, certainly, but I think it would, I don't know whether I should say this or not, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. I think more coaches have to work harder if you put it in. Some of them don't have to work as hard this way. You're going to have to work to adjust to get the shot within your length of time, instead of just taking your time and taking all day. You'll just have to work to do it. Of course you'd have to work and work harder. That's what you're paid for. Pitifully poor, but that's what you're paid for.
Questions in the back.
I better get some in the back. Yes.
Philosophy not to use the bench very much. In fact, some time ago you said even this year you use only 7 or 8 players. What's the reason behind it? I mean, if you have a good bench, why not use it?
Well, I think that's very simply explained. Oftentimes you say that if you use everyone an equal amount of time, for example, sometimes I have to explain this to players, If you use them all the same amount of time, they say, we're about the same ability, so shouldn't we get to play as much? Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Sure does, makes sense. But if I try to develop them where they all play the equal amount of time, then no one's going to be that good. The team cannot be that good. I feel that it's one of the very unpleasant obligations, responsibilities that a coach has, is to decide after a reasonable length of time the players that are going to do most of the playing, and then essentially he must develop them as a unit, so that they just work with each other just subconsciously. They just know what the other fellow's going to do to a great deal, to a great extent. And then you've got to work from there the other players that you're going to have to bring in on specific occasions when you lose those. Now, generally speaking, my philosophy for the most part is it takes 7 or 8 players to carry the load of the playing time until games are won or lost, but it takes 15 players to develop them to the point where they can do that. So there is a part for everyone. Each has his part. But everyone wants to part in the starting lineup. That's what they want. They want the, if they're not a starter, there are many that feel that they just don't want any part. But gracious sakes, I don't care what it is. Which is the most important part of an automobile? It's not going to run without a wheel. Now, is a wheel more important than the engine? Well, it's not going to run without the engine either. You have to have all. Each has its place. But I don't believe that you can develop them all and play too many. The more you try to work in my opinion, the poorer your overall teamwork will be. And I think you have to function. My job is to develop a team that functions efficiently. And I hope I don't hurt anybody doing it. And I do. But I don't want to. There's no personalities involved. You know, I have a player, will talk to me now and then. They'll talk to me. He'll want to know, and I'll get letters. I'll get some letters this year, before long, about how come so-and-so didn't make your traveling squad. You don't know how you've hurt this youngster. He's really hurt. Well, if he didn't make it, somebody else, if he did make it, somebody else wasn't going to. And if I did, I'd get letters saying, you don't know how you've hurt this youngster. So which one am I going to hurt? I don't want to hurt any of them. But the rules say we travel 12 and dress 12. The rules say we start 5. If we had a 10-man game, then I'd play 10 men and develop it. But you have to develop a group that works together. That's part of the responsibility you have, and you can't do it by forever procrastinating and deciding, well, better try this fellow, and I better try this fellow, and I'll try this one. The longer you put it off, you don't ease the situation. You don't make it easier by putting it off longer. And you're better to do it after a reasonable length of time, even if you're wrong in the ones you pick. The team is going to be stronger, and I believe my responsibility is the team. That's about the only way I could explain it to you. Yes?
Has the NCAA changed its opinion yet on the dunk rule?
Well, NCAA has nothing to do with the dunk rule. The NCAA has absolutely nothing at all. You can blame the NCAA for some things, but it isn't right at all to blame them for the no dunk rule. That's the Rules Committee, only the Rules Committee. And the college coaches have some representatives on the Rules Committee. High school coaches have, YMCAs have, military, armed forces have, Canadian YMCA, and I believe Canada has 2 representatives on the Rules Committee. And so it's a makeup of various entities, and they work hard. I have great respect for the Rules Committee. I have much greater respect for the Rules Committee after having served as a member for 5 years in the middle 60s than I had before, to be honest. And then I have a little appreciation of how difficult it is. You know, it's easy to criticize when we're outside. Sometimes when we get in there, on whatever it is, whether it's a Rules Committee or anybody, when you're in the position, you find it's a little more difficult. The grass always looks a little greener on the other side of the street. It's always easy to tell what the other fellow should be doing. Gracious, after ball games, I get all sorts of advice. But this type of advice is seldom given to me before the games, you know. They may give me advice before the game, but it's after the game. Of course, things went wrong. You shouldn't have done this. I know that after the game. They don't have to tell me. They don't have to tell me at all. But they seldom tell me that before the game. They have other ideas. And you know, people always have ideas as to whom should be playing, but somebody has to make the decision. That's the responsibility of the coach. Not an easy one. And you get very attached to every player you have. Sometimes you get more attached to some that don't get to play as much as you do those that get to play a lot. But you can't let that enter into the decisions you make as far as the progress of the game is going. You must not do that. Once you do that, you're whipped. You're through. You better get out if you let other people, or you let your emotions make your decisions. It's like discipline a child or a youngster. The time will come when you'll have them, I hope. You can't let your emotions discipline them. You got to do it with reason. And sometimes your reason is going to be bad. It's going to be poor. You're not right all the time, but that must be there. You've been trying to get a question in here for some time.
If you use non-conference games as a teaching vehicle, why doesn't UCLA schedule more formidable non-conference opponents?
Well, we have tried to. but there's specific reasons. If you'd notice in our since we have changed to the quarter system, I don't know if you noticed that, we have had far more difficulty in scheduling majority of the type of teams that I'd like to play, and it's very easy to understand once it's explained, and I'll attempt to do it as best I can. I don't do the scheduling, but I'm not shifting this responsibility to anybody else because I know about it, and nothing is shoved down my throat in that respect. This year, for example, I would very much have liked to have played a tough road trip before we open the conference, but we don't. But I don't want to say that I'm blaming someone for it because I am not. There are reasons. I also like to open the season at home. I like that. And we know our students like that too. We like to open at home. All right? You open at home the first weekend. What do you have the second weekend? Do you know what that second weekend is? It's the weekend before finals and the quarter system. I don't like to take the players away and the weekend before finals. I don't think it's good. I would prefer not to take them away. Well, what's the next time you play? It's after finals. It's not too good to go away right after finals either, when you haven't been together, all together as a team for many days of the practice during that period. Isn't too good. They're out of condition a little bit due to missing some practice, and their working together is off a little, their timing's off a little because we've been away. Now that's after the finals. Then comes after Christmas. Well, every other year we're committed to a Bruin Classic. And this is the situation we're caught in this year. Now, next year, we'll go away for a tournament after Christmas. And those other dates is just hard. Now, the best chance is to go away before Christmas to after your finals. And I myself don't like to do that too well. Perhaps I should have this year insisted on it and tried to do it, but we couldn't do it this year because of the commitment we've had with Notre Dame, which was made some time ago that we're going to play them home and home, and now we're playing them one of their times. The time here had to be before Christmas, the only time it could be worked in, so there are specific reasons for it. Furthermore, with this in mind, there are a lot of teams that don't want to come play you. An awful lot of teams that just don't want to come and play us. Now, there are some that will come play us if we'll come there, but there are a lot of them that won't come play us under any circumstances. And a lot of the teams that sometimes will write about wanting to play us, they don't, because when they have the opportunity, they don't.
Who are they?
They watch their schedule very carefully. I thought maybe this year, when they knew we were losing as many as we would, you'd have more, but some of them didn't analyze. There's one coach in the country that I've heard said about him, he knows more about every opponent than he does about himself, about his own team, and he schedules most adroitly. And he's always playing teams away from home the year after they've had a good team and lost everybody. And he plays the other good teams, they're always at home, the good teams, so he handles it pretty well. Well, that's good. But I've given you an idea, I think why. It isn't as easy as it seems. And my general instructions are I like to play as many different teams and get as different styles and teams from different conferences, different areas as possible. And I personally feel I'd like to play as strong a non-conference schedule as we can get. And I think that's what we're doing. Sometimes that isn't strong, but it's under the times that when you can play, you can't always get them. Your first weekend's always very, very difficult because most everybody likes to open the season at home. Yes?
Could you assess the potentials of your sophomores, Walton, Wilkes, and Lee?
Well, he asks me to assess the potential of Walton, Wilkes, and Lee, and I'd say it's good. I'd say that Walton is going to be a star in time. He's a team-oriented, he's a defensive player, and offensively he thinks of the team, defensively he thinks of the team, and he has the physical equipment to make this type of thinking very effective as far as the team is concerned. There are a lot of fellows that think that way, but they don't have the physical equipment for it to do you much good. But he has. He's a very maneuverable 6'11" man. I just think that he has all the qualifications that if he isn't hurt some way, that he eventually is going to be a star. Wilkes' biggest handicap at the present time is his youth, his weight. He will finish his sophomore year over 2 months before he becomes 19, and that's very young. He graduated from high school before he was 17. He's very young, and he's 6'6" and only weighs around 170 pounds, and he's very light. But I think he's wiry, and I think he's durable, and he's very intelligent, and I think that he has a bright future. Greg Lee's biggest handicap is that he's not a real quick youngster. He has lack of speed and lack of quickness, but there again he makes up for a part of this, at least by being a very intelligent player too. He's the only youngster that ever came to me, as far as I know, that was truly a straight A student. Now, I've had many that were very close. I think Keith Wilkes had 2 B's in high school and everything else was A's. I think Gary Franklin had 2 B's and everything else was A's. I think Don Bragg a few years ago had 1 or 2 B's, and Eddie White had 1 or 2 B's and the rest A's. Greg Lee never had anything but an A. And how somebody didn't like him somewhere along the line, I don't know. Because I know whenever I got a grade that it was because they didn't like me. It wasn't because I had to. Greg is very intelligent, and he has good hands, and I think he has also a good future. He shoots pretty well, and his weakness at the moment is defense, and he's working on it, and sometimes you can make up for lack of physical ability by actions up here, and he does a pretty good job. Question back there. No, I haven't really as yet. They're practicing on the other side of the curtain, so to speak. I really don't get to see them. I talk with Coach Arnold about them every day, but I don't see them enough. But I think I can get an assessment from him. McCarter's going to be an outstanding basketball player, I think, as are the other 2 freshmen that we have on scholarship. And we have another 1 or 2 out there that certainly are going to catch your eye as far as the freshman is concerned, but these 3 are potentially fine basketball. David Myers, Pete Turgovich, and Andre McCarter. Yes.
How's your team's spirit this year? Do they feel that they're going to have to, now that, a couple years ago they wanted to prove they could do it without Lou. Now that you've lost about the best front line in basketball, now you've got another team that's coming up saying, well, we want to do it ourselves. There's a spirit to this year. Spirit's very good. From a coaching point of view, I can't remember having enjoyed the first month of practice as much as I have enjoyed this one. Everything has gone well, from the attitude, the hustle, the spirit of the players themselves. But they are young, they are inexperienced, they are light, they are handicapped in those respects. And youth tends to react more from emotion than reason. Now, don't hop on me for saying that, please. But this is true. I think the more experienced you get, the more you reason. The younger you are in all things, you tend to let your emotions control a little more. I think they can be the controlling, not all the time, but oftentimes, more often than not, they can be the controlling. And not that all older people reason. I don't say that either. But I'm saying youth tends that way more, and older ones tend the other way a little more. But at times, you can't rush experience. It's something you can't hurry. And at times in our practices, we'll have greater heights and greater depths. I'm sure that we will. But we'll gradually smooth those valleys out, I think, because the spirit is good. But when things go bad for them, they may go worse. Just get worse because of the fact that they won't fight back with reason. Now, last year, for example, we had older, experienced players, strong players physically, had great confidence in themselves, and we got in trouble early because they just knew they were better. They were good. They knew they were good. And they went out there and couldn't understand why the other fellows didn't lay over at times. But they did have the strength, they did have the ability, they did have the power, that they didn't blow.
and they had the ability to come back by not letting their emotions take over. Now, whether this group can attain that in time or not, I don't know. I am hopeful that they can, because I think that, as I say, and I've indicated, it's the most intelligent group, and it's really been, from a coaching point of view, more fun than. Another thing about youth, it's like in the summers I go out and have a summer basketball camp, and I work with youngsters, and I often say, that's fun. You know, they're more interested in how, and when you get them in college, why do we have to do this? It's why. It's why we have to do it, not how to do it. They're not that eager to learn how. They're more why. Then they know more. I've said that. Now, I don't know if any of them are in here or not, but I've said this group will be a joy to work with next year and a pleasure next year, and then when they're seniors, no, they'll know it all, and they'll be hard to work with. Now, I hope I'm wrong, of course, on all those particular things. Question back here.
Last year, a couple of times, you made an analogy between Sidney Wicks and Larry Holiday, and I was wondering, what is he speaking to this year?
I said a year ago that Larry was much like Sidney when he first came here. That's correct. That he didn't have his game under control as well. I think Larry's coming along, but it's still not under control the way I want it. And I'll be very disappointed if eventually that doesn't come around, because I think Larry has great ability and he's trying hard. And if I, as a coach, am not able to bring out his best, then I failed. And I feel at this point I have. And it's not enough for me to say, well, it's up to him. That's my job to try to get it out. And maybe if I didn't have somebody right along all the time that was perhaps equal to doing a little better, I'd work harder on him individually, but you just can't do that, you see.
I'd like to ask the last question, Coach. Are we going to be fast breaking this year and using the full court press?
We are.
Thank you.